Life as the Avengers Housekeeper by Married to My Phone on Tumblr, if you want to check it out. Who did it? The Avengers had gone through more than what any regular person could ever imagine. It felt as though every day they were putting their lives on the line to protect others, and they did it all with a brave face. Whether it be Nazis, aliens, super soldiers, they defeated them all, and saved the world more times than they could count. They were heroes, the greatest hope of the earth. There was nothing that could defeat them, and whenever they were brought down, they never hesitated to get back up. It was as if after everything they've seen, nothing could ever scare them anymore. In a way, that was true. Very little scared the members of the Avengers. They almost feared nothing at all, except for one person. Who did it? The Avengers were lined up in the middle of the living room of the compound. Some had their arms crossed with a defensive look on their faces. Some were avoiding eye contact and moving awkwardly. Either way, they were all forced to face the 5'2" woman in front of them, who was close to losing her shit. You had spent the entire day cleaning up after Tony, who threw a party last night. Then you had to carry all that damn laundry to the laundry room, which for some reason was on the other side of the damn compound. Then do grocery shopping because their fridge was completely cleaned out for the week. Then you had to fold and distribute the clothes. Then you spent 3 hours cooking dinner. All you had to do was set the table and eat. Then everything would be done. You could sleep and everything would be fine. It was an incredibly stressful day. You just wanted to get it over with. But of course, something had to go wrong. There was a missing glass from the cabinet, and that completely ruined the table set. You couldn't find it anywhere, and you had told this team of knuckleheads thousands of times over that after using a dish, they put it in the sink. Not even the dishwasher, because you didn't trust them to organize it properly. Of course, they stayed stubborn, and normally you would let it go. But today, you were looking to beat some butt. So there you were, standing impatiently in front of the world's strongest heroes, threatening them with a slipper. Behind you was a table set with perfectly good food that was getting cold by the second. No one was allowed to eat until you figured out which one of them was guilty for leaving a glass out. Peter, the boy flinched and almost physically jumped at his name being called, hesitantly raising his head and meeting the woman and meeting your eyes. I won't get mad if it was you. Just be honest, you said in a calming tone, though still gripping a slipper in your hand didn't do much to ease Peter's nerves. It wasn't me, I swear. I always wash the dishes after I use them, like you told me to. I even dry them and put them back in the right cabinet right after, instead of using the dishwasher, because that wastes money. Peter whined, still very scared, as he eyed the slipper in your hand. All right, I believe you. You can eat, you said with a sigh, and Peter let out a breath of relief, a smile coming up to his face as he happily left the line and went to the dining table where food was prepared. Sam, Bucky, you called out, and Sam let out an offended grunt. Why are you asking us? He asked, and you raised an eyebrow at him. Why are you so defensive? You countered, and Sam looked away guiltily at the question. I can't speak for Sam, but it wasn't me. I have my own bottle I drink from. I never use the glasses, Bucky said, and you stared him down, trying to gauge whether or not the man was lying. He stared back challengingly, though when you tilted your head, he couldn't help but clear his throat in awkwardness, his eyes going down to the floor. For such a stoic man, who was known for his unwavering stare, it would be a shock to see him fall to the gaze of such a tiny person. But it happened so often now that the rest of the team was used to seeing it. "You can eat," you said, and Bucky gave a grateful nod, walking over to the table with Sam trying his best to walk with him without drawing attention. "Sam, you're not off the hook yet." Sam let out a groan, muttering about how it wasn't fair as he went back in line. "Rogers, you gonna diplomat your way out of this one?" you asked, turning to the man who had his arms crossed with an amused look on his face. "You saw me drinking earlier. You also saw me put the glass in the sink, so it wasn't me," Steve said, rather happy with his prepared alibi. "That doesn't mean you didn't use a glass earlier. I see it all the time. You use one glass, put it in the sink, then take out a perfectly clean glass an hour later instead of using the one you already took. You're not safe yet," you said, pointing the slipper at Steve, who shook his head and raised his hands in defense. "Natasha, it was me," Bruce spoke up in a shaky voice. "But you didn't move your eyes from Natasha." "No," you said in response to the scientist who opened his mouth to retort. "But, Bruce, sit your butt down," you interrupted, tilting your head over to the table. Bruce glanced between Natasha and you before letting out a sigh and reluctantly making his way over to the table so he could eat. "What's your excuse?" you asked Natasha, who had a stone-cold look on her face, incredibly unreadable. "I don't drink a lot of water," Natasha said, and you narrowed your eyes at the woman. "I know, which is why we're going to have a talk later about your health. Now, get over there," you said, and Natasha let out a sigh before she went over to the table, mumbling about how she was in perfectly good health. "What do you have to say for yourself, old man?" you said, turning to Clint, who let out a tired sigh. The one time he decided to stay over for the weekend, and he was already in the middle of another issue. "Look, I live with 3 kids and a wife who likes to have the house in a very specific way. If someone's gonna misplace a glass, it's not me," Clint explained, and you narrowed your eyes at him before relenting. "Fine, but only because Laura always talks about how great you are at home." The words made Clint smile, and he happily went to eat dinner while texting his wife and teasing her about what you said. "Thing 1 and thing 2, you said as you turned to face the twins. Pedro was sitting on the couch, staring at the food impatiently, while Wanda had a confident look on her face. "I'm the most organized person in this entire compound, and you know it. I would never leave a glass out. I even took out all the dishes from the dishwasher and put them all back in the right place while you were out," Wanda said, and you smiled happily at the girl. "I know you did, and thanks so much for that. Go eat," you said in a kind tone. Wanda sent a cheeky grin to her twin brother and flipped him off with both fingers before going over to the table. Pedro rolled his eyes, about to flip his sister back when he caught the glare you were sending his way. "You beautiful, kind, talented you," Pedro said with a sheepish grin. "Did you leave the glass out?" you asked, ignoring Pedro's flattery. "No," the boy answered simply. "I don't believe you," you responded, and Pedro let out a scoff, hand shooting up in disbelief. "What do you want me to say? I didn't do it," Pedro said. But when you showed no signs of believing him, he let out a huff and crossed his arms, pouting like a child. "And then there were 3, you said, looking at the remaining Avengers. Steve continued to look incredibly amused at the situation. Sam looked offended, while Pietro continued sulking. "Time's ticking, boys. They're gonna finish all the food before I even think about letting you eat." you said, staring down at the three. And what are you gonna eat, huh? You gonna starve like the rest of us? Sam asked dramatically, pointing his finger at you, who raised an eyebrow at him. Sam quickly put the finger down, but continued his stance. I spent 7 days locked in a cell with no food and water, and still managed to survive. One night without dinner won't kill me. Besides, I can cook whatever I want, whenever I want. You countered, and Sam cursed under his breath. Damn, you're good, Sam said, and Steve shook his head at the hilarity of the situation. Look, maybe depriving us of a meal isn't the best way to sort this situation out. How about we discuss it formally over dinner like adults and get to the bottom of it? You spent so much time making this dinner for us. It'd be a waste if it wasn't eaten by all of us, Steve said, slowly approaching you with his arms out. Kiss ass, Sam muttered. Sam muttered to Pietro, who snickered. You cleared your throat and glared at the two. Pietro slammed Sam's shoulder to show that he was on your side. But this only caused Sam to retaliate, and the two began a back and forth fight of slapping each other, which you rolled your eyes at. You make a very compelling case, Steve, but no, I'm standing my ground. Until you all learn how to follow the small amount of rules I ask of all of you, the next dinner you're going to be eating will be laced with poison, you said, pointing your finger and glaring at Steve. Hey gang, what's for dinner? Everyone in the room turned to Tony, who walked into the room. His hair was wet with a towel around his neck, and the man walked over to the water dispenser with an empty glass in his hand. What? Tony asked, turning to the team with furrowed eyebrows when he realized everyone was staring at him in complete silence. You let out a deep breath from your nose, eyes closed as you tried to control your irritation. The Avengers watched with bated breath as you went over to the fridge and pulled something out before going over to the pantry and pulling something else out. You then walked back to Tony, snatching the glass in his hand while he was mid-drink, causing some of the water to splash on him. Hey, he said in protest, but was cut off when you shoved two things in his hand. He looked down to see a tiny tub of microwavable rice along with a can of tuna in his hands. Enjoy your dinner, Tony, you said with a menacing smile before turning to Pietro, Steve, and Sam. Go on and eat, you three. You're gonna run out, you said, and there was a pause before everyone went back to their business. Sam and Pietro quickly went over to the table, and Steve went over to the dumbfounded Tony Stark, who was looking in confusion at his dinner before glancing over to the whole meal prepared for the rest of them. You might want to go take a look at the rule list again, buddy, Steve said, patting Tony on the shoulder before going over to the table. Everyone who feeds Tony is eating canned food for the next week. You called out from where you were before entering the room, and slamming of the door ringing through the air. You let out a sigh and went over to your bed, reaching into your side table and taking out a Tupperware of mini donuts before grabbing a remote and turning on the TV. It was a known rule in the compound that no one was allowed to eat on their beds, but you were an exception to the rule, not just because you made them either. You were one of the more responsible for doing everything around the compound. The rules were simply to make things a bit easier on yourself. If the you from a few years ago saw you now, they would think that you were some kind of imposter and would kill you on sight. But so much has changed during that time. From one of the best Hydra and SHIELD agents in the field to the Avengers Housekeeper. You went from having a kill count of over 200 people during your first year as an agent to a 98% success rate on missions at the age of 9 to doing the Avengers' dirty laundry every Sunday. You used to be a high-level threat. And if you hated and if you lasted long enough, you would have been an Avenger level threat too. But now you help out Spider-Man with his home economics homework every other weekend. Sometimes you find yourself thinking, what the hell am I doing? Whenever you remember that you could very much kill everyone in the compound without breaking a sweat, but just as fast as that thought came, it disappeared with a mere shrug. That life was way behind you. Old you would think she was complete. Old you would think you were completely humiliating and a disgrace to everything you worked for if they saw you now. But present you didn't give a single shit. You liked the life you had now. And you meant that. You never imagined yourself picking up after the Avengers, who surprisingly were the most reckless people when it came to self-care. But here you were now, and you weren't complaining. Well, sometimes you did complain, but overall it wasn't a bad time. You had originally met the Avengers when they were formed. Saved for Clint and Natasha, you'd been there from the beginning, undercover Hydra agent posing as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, who was then chosen for the Avengers initiative. It was supposed to be easy. Act like a hero and get all the information you could on them and help Hydra take them down, along with anyone else who got in their way. But you were compromised, emotionally at least. Even though you had too much pride to admit it out loud, they all knew it. You had grown fond of them and didn't particularly want to see any of them die. So you indirectly helped Steve with the whole Hydra situation at S.H.I.E.L.D. When they realized you as a member of Hydra all along, they threw you into a cell and subjected you to a bunch of questioning. It took a really long time to get everyone to trust you again, but you found your way. You ended up escaping your cell and went into hiding for an incredibly long time. Then the Battle of Ultron came and you decided, why not fight with them one last time against a bunch of murderous robots in a floating city? It was a good way to go. But somehow they all managed to get out of that alive, realizing that you really were a changed person. The Avengers decided they could keep you around. It was clear that you weren't the same person as before and had no intentions of breaking their trust again. They had offered you your old job as an Avenger once more, and after thinking about it for a while, you realized that you didn't want to go back to fighting. The battle in Sokovia was more than you had ever bargained for, and you really were not prepared to die then. You knew that if you stayed with the Avengers, things would be just like that, if not worse, and you were tired. You spent your whole life fighting, raised from the ground up to be nothing but a soldier meant to be ready to give up their life for a cause you never believed in. But you didn't want to leave them either. That time you spent laying low was one of the loneliest times in your life. The Avengers taught you what it meant to be a human instead of a weapon, and you owed them the world. You just weren't ready to pay that debt through more years of fighting. During that time on the run, though, you learned one thing. You were damn good at housework. You had to keep yourself occupied during that time alone, and you spent most of it learning how to cook, clean, and everything else. It was relaxing to you because it kept your mind off of the bad things. When the Avengers brought you to the new compound, where there was always some new mess being made, you felt like you were in a playground. So much to clean, and you were more than willing to do it all for them. Well, most of it. The compound was a huge place. You weren't about to clean all of that every single day, even you had your limits. So they agreed to keep your services within the living area, and if you were particularly bored, you could clean elsewhere if you so pleased. Soon enough, it was decided that you were going to be the Avengers housekeeper. They were a bit hesitant about it first. It didn't really feel right to have an old member of the Avengers just clean up after them like a maid, though you did threaten all of them that if they ever needed a housekeeper, you'd kill them all in a heartbeat. Years passed though, and you continued being their housekeeper. Plus, the team grew, and you found yourself with a family. You were happier than ever, despite how annoying some of them could be. Being a worldly threat and deadly killer couldn't compare to picking after these odd bunch of heroes. Being the Avengers housekeeper changed your life for the better, as you were introduced to things you never would have known had you stayed with Hydra. It was no surprise that Hydra didn't care much for their agents. For a long time, you were living like a weapon, and you never saw anything wrong with it because you didn't think there was any other way to live. But then you became part of the Avengers, and they treated you like you were a real person. It took a while, but the longer you stuck around with them, you started believing that maybe you were human. You liked feeling human. You liked all the things the world had to offer. And you liked the feeling you got when you were around the Avengers. So there you were, lying in your bed, eating donuts while watching some children's cartoons, while just years ago you were spilling blood without even a second thought. Life was good. End of story. Hope you enjoyed.